Plastic is the new Satan, our biggest enemy. Well, that's what you might be led to believe if you just read and listened to the chorus of disapproval. But aren't there more important things to worry about? And is the whole campaign going just that little bit too far? You're watching Roundtable with me, David Foster. So if we get rid of plastic, it will solve all of our pollution problems immediately, right? Well, maybe not. If you consider the material resource, the energy used to make it, and the greenhouse gas emissions, are paper and cotton bags just as bad or perhaps even worse than plastic?
Plastic has found its way into every part of our lives. And whatever we buy often ends up in a plastic bag. It's estimated up to 1 trillion are discarded each year. Supermarkets around the world have started charging for them to discourage use. Will banning plastic bags make a difference, or are they unfairly carrying the blame? The cost of pollution. A whale suffocated after swallowing more than 80 plastic bags. A study from last year calculated the total volume of all plastic ever produced at 8.3 billion tonnes. 6.3 billion tonnes of that is now waste. The US and the UK throw away 550 million plastic straws every day, and almost 20,000 plastic bottles are produced every second. A 2016 report warned that plastic in the ocean is expected to outweigh fish by 2050. If current production and waste management trends continue, roughly 12 billion tonnes of plastic waste will be in landfills or the environment. The growing pressure to tackle single-use plastic has seen governments bring in regulations on plastic bag use. In the UK, a 7-cent charge was introduced in large shops in 2015, and there are plans for that to be extended to nearly all retailers. More than 40 firms in the UK have signed a pact promising that all of their plastic packaging will be reusable, recyclable or compostable within 7 years. An increasing number of countries are either banning or limiting the use of plastics.
अगर पहले टाइम किसका को प्लास्टिक किसके हाथ में मिलता है या दुकान में मिलता है या उत्पादन करता है तो उसको 5,000 रुपए का दंड का है, जुर्माना का है.
The private sector is also responding to pressure to be more environmentally friendly.
Over the last 12 months, we've reduced around 140 tonnes of plastic from our produce area, and we've got around another 80 initiatives that we've earmarked for the next 12 months to look at of where we can remove plastic.
Most recently, Starbucks announced it had plans to eliminate plastic straws from all stores by 2020. Plastic bags are not recyclable, but critics say reusable plastics may not be the solution to everything. Alternatives to plastic bags have environmental impacts of their own. A paper bag would need to be reused at least 4 times and cotton bags at least 173 times to have a lower environmental impact than single-use plastic bags. Plastic bags get a bad rap, but they're only a small part of a bigger problem. Do bans really make a difference? Or are the environmental costs of the reusable bags just as bad, if not worse, than disposable ones? How much damage will be done while we explore more effective alternatives?
A great deal to talk about. Joining us from Victoria in Australia, we have Trevor Thornton, waste management expert at Deakin University in Victoria. Says it's not as simple as plastic is the only bad thing. We go to County Kerry in Ireland and find Lucy Hunt, Sustainability Education Manager for the Volvo Ocean Race, which is working with the UN's Turn the Tide on Plastic campaign. Says she saw an awful lot of plastic waste during the course of that race. We have Emma Priestland, Plastic Pollution Campaigner for Friends of the Earth, and Sian Sutherland, co-founder of the campaign group A Plastic Planet. Thank you all very much for coming in. Sian, just before we went on air, you said you are no eco-warrior saint. But is plastic the new Satan?
I think plastic is the most incredible material. Look what man's invented. Who knew we could do this? We've invented a material that lasts forever. And what have we done with it? We have totally disrespected this miracle material, taken it off the pedestal that really it should be on. We've thrown it in the gutters, we've thrown it in the oceans, we've thrown it in the soil, thrown it in our fields. We've treated it like rubbish. So really, it's not that plastic is the evil one. It's the way that we have misused plastic.
Well, how should we have done it then?
Well, I think it would have helped if we'd had respect for the properties of this material from the very beginning. We've known that plastic will last for centuries and centuries since plastic was first produced. We've seen documents of meetings that the plastic industry held decades and decades ago, worrying about what would happen.
They were worried, they didn't think it was a good thing that they could have built something that, you know, just wouldn't ever become obsolete.
I think they were concerned about what would happen once it reached the oceans. And this is exactly what we're seeing now. It's just accumulating in ever greater numbers. In every environmental compartment that we look at, we're finding plastic.
Why did you start the group?
The catalyst for me, really, and when I say I'm no, big environmentalist or eco-warrior, and I'm definitely no plastic saint. I mean, I ran a skincare brand for 10 years in 10 different countries. How many white plastic pump bottles did I push out into the environment? I didn't really even think about it. And then I got involved in the launch of the film A Plastic Ocean. And that really was the epiphany for me, because I had no idea, not only what have we done to the oceans, but what ultimately are we doing to the health of future generations. And once I knew, I couldn't not do something about it. So that's when we launched our campaign 2 years ago, which was starting really with trying to give the public a choice, because there's no point making people feel bad about something and yet giving them no choice if they want to change. So that's when we launched our campaign for a plastic-free isle in
Lucy, which brings us to the oceans, as we've heard from Sian here, and you've spent a lot of time out at sea. What shocked you the most about what you saw?
I think for the Volvo Ocean Race, we've been involved in our science program where we're sampling for microplastics. And one of the most shocking things was that basically everywhere that there were samples taken on this 45,000-mile route around the world in the race, that they found plastics, microplastics in all of the oceans. In Antarctic Ocean, at Point Nemo, where the closest people to you are in a space station, you know, there's nobody in these areas, but there's actually plastic accumulating. And it's throughout the ocean. It's at the surface. Even we're finding it down at the bottom of the ocean now as well, thousands of meters below the surface.
You see, it's going to take a long time to win this battle, if it's winnable at all. Do you see any progress being made?
Definitely, there's progress. Just through the Volvo Ocean Race, we've had ocean summits, which have allowed us to bring together a lot of different people from different backgrounds. That's government, it's scientists, conservationists, and manufacturers. We've even had plastic producers at our ocean summits, where we all come together and talk about solutions to the ocean plastic pollution problem. So we've had people signing up to the Clean Seas Pledge. So that's the governments are making a commitment to actually reduce the use of plastic and single-use plastics in their countries.
Trevor, let me come to you, if I may, and produce one of the few props I've ever produced on this programme. Paper bag, plastic bag. Sounds like Tommy Cooper, doesn't it? This is the evil one, and this is absolutely fine, but it's not as simple as that, is it?
No, definitely not. The paper bag, as said in the introduction, it has to be used at least 4 times, and it depends on whether it's got any little bit of plastics or other bits and pieces which you can sometimes get. But you've got to acknowledge that most people, particularly the plastic bags coming from supermarkets, get used 2, perhaps 3 times. People take their shopping into the household, unpack their bag, and then use it for a garbage bin liner or you know, anything else. But now that we're banning them, we're going to see, particularly in Australia, the sales of gar bags, which have more resources, more plastic in them, skyrocket. So we've just got to make the decisions based on good science rather than emotion. No one disputes that there is plastic pollution in the ocean and we need to do something about it, but perhaps we need to look at behaviour change as well as trying to reduce the amount of packaging.
So is what we're seeing perhaps some, don't worry Lucy, I'll let you jump in, but is what we're seeing, Trevor, perhaps some kind of virtue signalling? That everybody started to say it's bad and therefore it is terribly bad, when in fact there are other things to be concerned about?
Absolutely. For example, again in Australia, we talk about plastic bags from from supermarkets rather, as entering the litter stream. But the studies have shown that it's actually not the supermarket plastic bags; it's the plastic bags from takeaway food shops and convenience stores are the ones that end in the litter stream, and they're not the ones that are being tackled.
Okay, I'm going to pack this away, but I know, Emma, you wanted to jump in. I'll try not to make too much noise. I shall put that back on the floor. I'll clean it up afterwards and probably reuse it. So, you
Recycle.
Say what you have to say.
Well, we fully agree that we need to use science we need to use sound science to make these decisions. But actually, from Friends of the Earth's point of view, there is no reason to use any kind of single-use plastic bags, whether they are paper or plastic. We think the reusable alternatives that can be reused hundreds of times are where we should be moving to. We need to look at smarter use of resources across the board. But the plastic bag legislation that we're now seeing across the world is really a first step. And this is one of the things that is helping raise awareness for other kinds of plastic uses. And we normally find countries or the European Union will then introduce more legislation that looks at other damaging uses of plastic. So we really believe that we should phase out all but the most non-essential.
And that's particularly when it comes to medicinal use, emergency supplies that have to be kept sterile, and plastic's the best way of doing it. But let's talk about these countries that have brought in legislation. Rwanda, India, Kenya, you can go to jail for having a plastic
or a
bag.
$37,000 fine.
But do you know of anybody going to jail?
Well, not personally,
Do you know of
no.
anybody being fined? Anybody here? No, we don't know.
We don't know, but maybe they have.
I've looked and I couldn't find any cases of it.
But
so
isn't
it's just sort of saying, we can do it, look how good we are, but in fact, you know, nothing's going to change.
Yeah, I don't know. I disagree. I think, look at what India are doing, and I think people are making huge sweeping statements in other countries. The UK particularly are incredibly slow. So much noise, so much lip service to change, and actually very little action.
Yeah, India, 4 kilograms of plastic per person during the course of a year. Developed countries, 40 kilograms.
Yeah, and
But India's always been low on this because poor people, and there are an awful lot of poor people in India, don't have access, and they don't go to supermarkets.
Yeah, but what they are living amongst is the devastating plastic pollution. So for a lot of countries like India, Asia, they're living amongst the pollution. And some of that is our pollution. You know, let's not forget that only until January of this year, the UK was shipping away, ramming into containers, 65% of our contaminated plastic rubbish, sending it off to another continent, sending it to China.
Mostly to China, which happens to be the world's worst polluter in any case.
So you know, with whose rubbish?
Yeah.
Because the rest of the world was sending their rubbish to China to deal with. They've actually done us a huge favour.
I know you want to say something, but we're going to go to our guests in Ireland and in Australia. And Lucy, before we go back to Trevor, you were nodding your head at some of what you've heard.
Yeah, we know that there is definitely a problem, but I very much agree with Emma. It's a way of raising awareness of this issue and also to try and create systemic change. So if we can start to see behavioral change with plastic bags, a single-use plastic, we can definitely start to see a change with other single-use plastics as well. And in the Volvo Ocean Race, that's very much part of our messaging, is to try to rethink the way we use plastic, and then to try and refuse the single-use plastics, the straws, the ones that we're all talking about nowadays. But it's really about rethinking the whole produce, cradle to cradle, how everything is made so that it's made more sustainably.
Trevor, let's talk about waste management, your area of expertise. How do you get rid of it if you're not dumping? Or if it's being dumped, how do you then pick it up? I've seen pictures, mock-ups of these massive floating drains that could be put in the middle of the ocean that would catch the plastic. Now, whether that's feasible or not, well, you'll tell me whether it's feasible or not, what would you do with it after that?
Well, you can recycle plastics. You know, plastic shopping bags can be recycled. What the problem is the whether the technology and as I think Lucy alluded to, or Emma, about China not taking out contaminated recyclables. So everything can be recycled. It's whether it's environmentally and economically feasible to do so.
Economically is an important one as well, though, isn't it? I mean, is it worth your while to do it?
Well, you've got to admit, all the recyclers, or particularly in Australia, they're private businesses, and they've got to make a profit, and so that if they can't get that feedstock, or they haven't got a market for it, what are they going to do with it? So it is feasible to do it, and there are troughs and peaks in terms of the world commodity markets for plastics and metals and paper and cardboard and so forth. That's just part of a normal cycle, but we do have a very heightened awareness about the issues associated with plastic. What I would like to see is a much more stronger focus on avoidance and all types of packaging, not just plastic.
But the problem is there, and the problem we're hearing most about is the problems with regard to the ocean. There's an awful lot of land problems as well. But go back to the first part of what I asked you, and those massive sinks, those huge floating drains. Could they work? Could they get the plastic out of the ocean, or is it being put in at such a rate that even if they were effective, they wouldn't be able to do it fast enough?
I think we've got to look at it in around about a two-stage approach. First one is to stop more going out there, putting there's technology you can buy off the shelf to put in the rivers and the lakes and the drains and all that, to stop more going out there, education of people so we don't litter as much. So all of that should happen, and then there is it's feasible to collect it from the oceans. It's the cost that's going to be, I guess, the real issue there.
And should that cost, Emma, I know there's something you want to say, but I mean, should that cost be borne by the governments and therefore eventually by people who live in the country, the taxpayers as well?
Actually, we do not believe that cleaning up the oceans of marine plastic pollution is feasible at all.
No.
The scale of the problem, the fact that it's broken down into microplastics, that it's absolutely all over the ocean, in the sediment, in the water column, it's just not feasible to do it in a way that is not going to cause significant damage to the marine life that is already living
just leave it there.
It goes 6 miles deep.
Basically.
We're never going to clean it up. We just need to turn off the plastic tap.
Exactly. That's why the only way we can deal with this problem is by reducing the amount of plastic that we use in total.
Okay. And legislation, what sort of legislation? Sorry, Lucy, do by all means.
Just educating the people not to litter is not a main solution. It's educating these new innovative ways of how we can produce things and actually reduce the plastic from the beginning and use different alternatives.
You see, the thing is, I was going to ask you, as somebody who spends a lot of time out on the water or working with people who do spend a lot of time out on the water, what do you think about the idea that it should just be left there? I mean, that's hardly ocean rescue, is it? That's sort of leaving something that's sort of pretty ill already just to get on with it.
I don't think it should just be left there, but I think there are some amazing solutions and innovations coming into play. Some of them are a bit far-fetched, that might not actually work, and a lot of money might be spent doing it, but we need to look at some of the solutions for sure. Yeah. I've done hundreds of beach cleans, and in the Volvo Ocean Race we did beach cleans throughout the race, every country we went to, and everywhere we found plastics on all levels, from microplastics to macroplastics. So we have to do that.
Trevor, sorry, yeah.
I was just going to say, I wasn't advocating that education is the only solution. It's a multi-pronged attack. And I think that what we've got to do is we've got to start somewhere. We've started with plastic bags. We're starting, certainly in Australia, with banning straws, plastic balloons. All those are very positive steps. And in the same token, we've heightened the awareness. But some of the comments that I'm getting in Australia is, what's the point if we're not cleaning up the oceans? What's the point if people are saying, yes, we're going to stop these plastics entering the ocean, but I think some effort to clean up and show that we are concerned. Yes, we're not going to get the microplastics and all that sort of stuff, but we can certainly, in a roundabout way, use a common phrase, skim the surface, and it shows people that organisations, United Nations, state governments, federal governments are willing to help clean up this planet.
Are there more important things to be worried about, though?
Actually, I think we need to be looking at how plastic is produced at the very beginning. The responsibility is really on the companies that are producing plastic to make sure that it's easy to recycle and to collect at the end of life, to stop using chemical additives, to stop making products that can't be pulled apart, so that the recycling industry is able to better deal with the problem.
Okay. Yeah, no, I understand that, but I'd answer Trevor's point that, you should at least show a willingness to clean the oceans, even if you can't get deep down.
Yeah, many people are. You've got
Yeah.
Boyan Slat, over in the Netherlands with his ocean cleanup project, who is very well funded. There's some really interesting projects.
But I thought you were both saying there's no
Well,
point,
we're saying,
really.
of course, we've got to try. But what we're saying is it's 6 miles deep and it's invisible to the human eye. So it's going to be incredibly difficult, which is why we really have to look at the amount of plastic. Just us sitting here today, how much is still being pumped out? The year of Blue Planet 2, the year that the UK really woke up, that year, last year, Coca-Cola pumped out 1 billion more plastic bottles than they did the year before. We think the tap is being turned off. It is not. And when we talk about recycling, we need to have a reality check. One bottle will never become another bottle. Plastic is not that kind of material. The technology is not there. It is always downcycled.
I've never quite understood why a company that makes fizzy drinks would want to put some into a plastic bottle, which we know is bad, and not into a tin or aluminium can, which you know can be easily recycled.
And they're trying
What's
to
the
do
logic?
They are definitely doing a little bit more of that. If you laid all the plastic bottles end to end that we produce in 1 year, it extends halfway to the sun. Where do we think all this plastic is going to go?
Hey, Lucy mentioned some barking mad ideas to try and get plastic out of the oceans. In case we read about these projects, which ones are the balmiest?
I'm not going to go around pointing fingers, but
Go
I would
on,
say
why
that
not?
anything that is occurring at sea has a very high potential to fail. The oceans are very complicated and destructive environments. I think that cleanups, when it happens on the shore or at rivers, this is a very sensible way to go about cleaning up. It's more when it's happening at sea that I think your success rate is a lot lower and the quantities you're removing are maybe not worth the effort.
Do you think you should jail people for using plastic?
I think that's a bit extreme.
Well, that's what they're suggesting.
I
In
think
Rwanda, for example.
It is a symbolic law, though, isn't it? And I think definitely we need legislation.
hang on, do you
The only
think-
thing that's going to really make a difference in all the countries that we're talking about is for legislation to be introduced. Business
But
wants
my point is
legislation.
people are sometimes going too far, saying you will go to jail for carrying a plastic bag. Too far. We're
And
going
I think-
too far the other way. Yeah, Trevor.
I think
And I think that's a valid point. You know, forgive the pun, but plastic's got a bad rap. Plastics are really good in some circumstances, and again, as you mentioned, David, at the beginning. And again, we're talking plastics, and this is where I get a little frustrated that we should be talking about avoidance and we should be talking about all packaging. We've got to be cautious about what we change to and why we're changing, because that can have more damaging impacts on the environment when you take the totality in terms of resource use, greenhouse gas emissions, waste disposal, and on it goes. So I think plastic's great. It's galvanised the community, and I'm not denying we need to do something, but we really do need to look at packaging as a total.
What is the next target, Trevor?
In terms of, I think the next target will be looking at whether recycling is viable or not. In Australia, we're talking, and I know overseas in Europe and England and other countries, waste to energy plants. We don't really have any here. So we're starting to look at whether that's a viable option for us, but it doesn't still stop the resource usage. It doesn't get into that avoidance mode, which we should be. And that's the primary goal of waste management, is avoidance.
Okay. Emma, I know you want to say something, but what do you think the next target should be?
Well,
likely to be?
I'll just quickly respond to the comment on waste to
knew you would.
energy. I'm sorry, I have to. We really do not see this as a viable solution. Waste to energy is just another form of burning fossil fuels. It's gone through a slightly longer life process, but we have to remember that plastic is fossil fuels. And as a planet, we are trying to wean ourselves off this. So waste to energy is a way of locking ourselves into this current wasteful system. Actually, what we need to do is find alternative models of delivering food. Like you mentioned, Coca-Cola and their plastic bottles. Coca-Cola used to use refillable glass bottles. They still do in many parts of the world. And they're actively moving away from what we would consider to be a very sustainable system to plastic, because they don't have to have responsibility for their products anymore. So maybe we need to look to the past a little bit. There are perfectly good ways of delivering food and other goods that don't rely on plastic.
Well, I would love to be able to buy my potatoes loose and then just throw them into something that the shopping bag I've taken with me. But you end up with sort of massive amount of packaging and far too many potatoes.
And then you put it in your recycling bin at home, thinking it's going to get recycled, and now we know it isn't.
I was going to ask you what you think is the next target, but you took up all your time, Emma, so I'm going to throw that question to Lucy. What should be the next target? I know oceans are your focus at the moment, but what do you think?
I think the education and awareness is extremely important, but educating in a way that we're looking at solutions and innovation, innovative ways to tackle the problem and to create new packaging and materials that can replace plastic.
Will you ever be able to, Sian, move on from your plastics campaign to another campaign? You're no eco-saint.
No, I think it's going to be a long time. I think it's going to be a long time, and I think there's so many things about plastic that, you know, the big white elephants in the room, the impact on human health, these stories have not even been told yet. We've got a lot further to go.
Okay, so what's your next plan?
Our next plan.
You've got one Dutch supermarket.
Dutch supermarket. Well, now 74 supermarkets. He's rolled the plastic-free aisle out into those.
Is that across the Netherlands?
Across the Netherlands,
yeah.
Yes. He's going 75% through his entire supermarket, plastic-free at Echo Plaza. Inspirational. We're working with many other supermarkets within the UK and Europe. We've introduced the world's first consumer trust mark, which is soon to be launched on 80 different brands.
And then their feeling is that it's worth it, not just ecologically, but in terms of customers, keeping your customers.
Yes, it's good for business. Businesses have to give their customers choice. If you want to be able to buy plastic-free, if you want to buy your potatoes without that plastic bag, you need to have that choice. And right now, you go to the supermarket particularly, and you have no choice.
Yeah, it's a question of relativity, I suspect, not in the Einstein terms of it, but in the sense of let's keep some of this in proportion. There is a problem out there. It's not just plastic. It's about all of the stuff that we throw away when we no longer need it. Do we need it in the first place? That's the question. This has been Roundtable. I'm David Foster. Thank you for watching. Thank you to my guests for coming on. See you next time, I hope. Bye-bye.